Christmas Eve. Snow clung to the dark driveway like 1,000 tiny reminders that this was supposed to be the season of forgiveness, of warmth, of family. I stood on the porch, my hands nearly frozen from carrying a pie made from scratch. Apple cinnamon, Dad's favorite. The carefully wrapped gift bag in my other hand felt heavier than it should have, weighted down by hope. Hope that maybe this time they'd remember I was their daughter. I knocked on the door. For a second, I heard laughter spilling out, plates clinking, music playing, my little cousin giggling, and that high-pitched squeal that used to make me laugh when I was a kid. My heart twisted. I was about to knock again when the door swung open. My mom stood there in a red sweater dress, her hair perfectly done, her perfume reaching me before her words did. Behind her, Dad appeared, his arms crossed, his face pinched in that way that always made me feel 10 years old again. They both looked me up and down from my sensible coat to the pie cradled like an offering, and then their eyes went dead flat. "We don't want you here," Mom spat, rolling her eyes like I was a stray cat tracking snow across her floor. "Go ruin someone else's holiday." It hit me like a slap. For a second, I couldn't move. My breath turned to ice in my chest. I looked over Mom's shoulder. The table was full, every place taken. My sister laughing with her boyfriend, one of my uncles telling a loud story, even neighbors I barely knew. There was a seat missing, though, the one I should have filled. They didn't save me a spot, not even one. I swallowed, my voice thin and breaking. "Really? You're turning me away on Christmas?" Dad didn't flinch. "You always bring drama," he said. "We just want peace tonight." I felt my throat closing up, tears stinging, but I forced myself to nod. "Got it," I whispered. And then I turned slowly, pie still in my hands, feeling my heart shatter in quiet pieces no one seemed to notice. I walked down those steps, each one harder than the last, until I reached my car. As I slid behind the wheel, I saw their silhouettes closing the door, shutting me out like I never belonged at all. But then, just 10 minutes later, headlights flashed behind me. I turned confused as the front door slammed open again. Dad, red-faced, panicked, was yelling my name into the night. And in that moment, I knew they had made a terrible mistake. The air was so cold it cut my throat as I stepped back out of the car, the pie still balanced awkwardly on my knees. I'd been sitting there trying to process it. Their ejection. The sight of that golden camelot table with my seat missing, my name erased like I was never theirs. And then the front door had burst open. Dad nearly tripping over his own boots, his voice booming into the night. "Hannah, Hannah, wait!" For a moment, I wondered if I'd made it all up. If maybe they'd come to their senses, realized they'd just hurt me in some twisted heat of the moment way, and were going to apologize. I opened the car door, one cautious foot on the snow. "What?" I croaked, my voice raw. Dad's face was wild, eyes darting around like he was counting witnesses. He stormed down the porch steps toward me, ignoring how everyone inside had gone silent. Next, craning to watch through the dining room window. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded. My chest tightened. "You told me to leave," he scowled. "That was before the bank called." I blinked, completely thrown. "The bank?" He nodded, breathing hard. "They said you filed something about your name being taken off the loan." My stomach dropped. The loan. The one reason they'd ever included me in the first place, because my name, my clean credit, had kept their house afloat when they were drowning. I'd filed to remove myself a month ago after the last humiliating fight when Mom told me I'd never amount to anything, and Dad had agreed. I hadn't even told them yet because deep down, I still hoped they'd change, that maybe if I showed up with pie and a smile, I could pretend things were normal. But it was Christmas Eve. The paperwork must have finalized. Dad's jaw worked like he was chewing gravel. "You have to fix it, Hannah. The bank says we'll lose the house if you don't co-sign again." My hands went numb around the pie dish. That was it. They hadn't come after me for forgiveness, or family, or love. They'd come for the guarantee. A free pass to keep living the life they built on my back. I set the pie gently on the passenger seat. My shoulders squared. a strange calm settling over me, so deep and heavy I could almost taste it. No, I told him. He staggered like I'd punched him. What did you say? I stepped out of the car completely, planting my boots in the snow, every word sharp as a blade. I said, "No, Dad. I'm done." His face turned the color of raw meat, mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. I reached back for the driver's door, eyes locked on his. "Merry Christmas," I said, and meant every syllable. Then I slammed the door and drove away, the weight on my shoulders breaking apart like ice in the sun, because for the first time in my life, I was free. I drove until the neighborhood was nothing but a fading blur of Christmas lights and camellit windows, each one like a silent witness to my undoing. The roads were slick, and my hands trembled on the wheel, but I didn't care. I kept going, breathing ragged, shallow bursts like I'd just run a marathon. They only call me back for the loan. I said the words over and over in my head, each repetition peeling away another layer of their illusion. They hadn't missed me. They hadn't worried about me. They didn't even ask why I hadn't come in. They just realized I'd taken their safety net with me, and panic replaced whatever scraps of love they pretended to have. I found a gas station on the outskirts of town, pulled in under its flickering canopy, and let the car idle while I tried to collect myself. The pie was still on the passenger seat, perfectly intact. A stupid, perfect symbol of the kind of daughter I'd tried to be. Giving, apologizing, endlessly hoping they'd see me. My phone buzzed again, lighting up the cracked dashboard. Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Then, Mom, decline. Then my sister, the same sister who laughed behind my back all my life, who once told me I was born broken. Decline. It kept buzzing, relentless, like their voices trying to crawl through the phone and drag me back. When it finally went quiet, I opened the voicemail. Mom's voice, tight and shrill, filled the car speakers. You selfish, ungrateful girl. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us after everything we did. You leave us to freeze in that bank's claws. You better fix this, Hannah. You better fix it now, or don't even think about showing your face again. I sat there breathing, tasting the metal tang of heartbreak in my mouth. She didn't even ask if I was okay, didn't even wonder where I'd go. Their version of family had never been love. It had been debt, obligation, manipulation dressed up as tradition. The tears finally came, hot and humiliating, running down my cheeks while the radio played some sickly, sweet carol in the background. But I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall because that was grief. The grief of finally seeing the truth. I pulled back onto the highway, leaving the gas station behind, letting the voicemail replay in my head like an echo I would never forget. You better fix this, Hannah. No. For once, I wasn't going to fix a single thing. I was going to let it fall. And if their house crumbled, if their illusions cracked wide open, that was their consequence. I deserved peace. I checked into a cheap motel that night, the kind with scratchy sheets and a rattling heater that never quite shut off. The lobby was decked out in sad dollar store tinsel, a half-lit Christmas tree leaning sideways next to a bowl of stale peppermints. The clerk barely looked at me, just slid the key across the counter, like he'd seen 1,000 other girls running from 1,000 other heartbreaks. Room 107. I carried the pie up the stairs with me, cradling it like a relic from a life I'd just buried. The motel hallway smelled like burned coffee and disinfectant. When I shut the door behind me, I collapsed onto the sagging bed, pie dish still in my lap, tears finally dry, but leaving behind that raw, hollow ache in my ribs. For the first time in my life, I was cut loose. No more Hannah, can you help? No more Hannah, you owe us. No more family comes first. Family. I tasted that word like poison. They had built their entire existence on my shoulders, expecting me to carry their mistakes, their debts, their pride. I'd done it because I was their daughter, because I thought it was love. But tonight, the scales fell from my eyes. They hadn't asked me to come in because they missed me. They asked me back because the bank had finally said no. I had been their guarantee. Their insurance policy, not a daughter, never a daughter. I set the pie on the small dresser, unwrapped it, and scooped a forkful straight out of the tin. The crust was perfect, cinnamon sweet, so heartbreakingly warm against the cold bite of December. I had baked it for them for Dad. I took another bite for me. I sat there cross-legged on that ugly motel bed, eating the pie I had once imagined sharing, and each bite tasted like a slow goodbye to the person I'd been. Outside, a police siren wailed down the highway, reminding me how close the world could come to breaking apart and still keep moving. And as I chewed, I thought about their house, that perfect picture they'd shown off to neighbors, bragging how successful they were, how strong the family bond was. That house was built on my name, and now, with my name gone, it would fall apart. Just like they'd fallen apart the moment I stopped letting them feed off me. It was almost poetic, almost beautiful. I finished the slice of pie and licked the fork, swallowing a new promise to myself. No more begging for their scraps. No more shrinking to fit their story. I was done. Morning light pushed through the cheap curtains, pale and unforgiving. I hadn't slept much. My dreams were crowded with their voices, the door slamming in my face, the echo of Dad yelling after me when the bank called. I rubbed grit from my eyes, blinking into the silence. There were no smells of cinnamon coffee, no familiar radio playing in the kitchen, no cheerful chaos of a family getting ready for Christmas morning. And for the first time, I didn't ache for it. I ached for something real. I stood, stretched, and padded to the small sink to splash water on my face. It felt good, shockingly cold, but honest, like a slap to keep me awake. My phone buzzed again. I had left it on the nightstand, switched off. I turned it on out of morbid curiosity, letting the messages flood in. 17 missed calls, 9 voicemails, and a wall of texts from my parents, from my sister, from relatives I hadn't heard from all year. "You're destroying us, Hannah. How could you do this on Christmas? This is your fault. Fix it." I scrolled, numb. They twisted the truth so quickly, it made my head spin. One moment, I was the inconvenient daughter. The next, I was their lifeline. Their villain. I played Dad's newest voicemail, his voice rasping with panic. "Hannah, the bank is serious. They said they can pull the entire loan if you don't reinstate your name. We'll lose the house. Your mother is beside herself. We took you in. We gave you everything. You can't just—" I ended the voicemail before he could finish. Took me in. I was their child, not a guest. But they had never seen me as anything more than a convenient breathing credit score. I sat on the bed, staring at the pie box half-eaten on the dresser. Their loss tasted bittersweet because I didn't want them to feel it. The burn, the shame. The same cold-eyed felt standing on their porch while they laughed over their plates. I wanted them to look around that empty house and remember how quickly they told me to go ruin someone else's holiday, and how 10 minutes later, the only thing ruined was their perfect dream. I grabbed my coat, buttoning it with hands that felt steadier than they had in years. I wasn't going to fix this. I wasn't going to pick up their shattered pieces. They were going to learn, maybe for the first time, how to survive without me. I checked out of the motel by noon, returning the key to the same disinterested clerk. Outside, the snow was already starting to melt, leaving behind muddy tracks and dull, tired grass poking through. It felt fitting, like the truth finally clawing its way through all the lies they'd layered on top of me. I slid behind the wheel of my car, the pie tin still on the passenger seat, now half-eaten. It smelled like comfort, like a memory I was trying to hold on to, but every bite only reminded me that I had baked it for people who told me to leave. My phone was buzzing again before I even started the engine. This time it was my sister. I let it ring once, twice, and finally answered. "Hannah!" She started, a voice tight to high-pitched. "Fake, you need to come back. Mom's crying nonstop. Dad hasn't slept. We're all worried." I stared at the dashboard, my jaw tight. "Worried?" I repeated. "About me?" Silence. "No," I continued, voice steady, terrifyingly calm. "You're worried about the house, about the loan, about the embarrassment. But me? You didn't care when you shut the door in my face." She sputtered, trying to recover. "It was a misunderstanding, Hannah. Mom was stressed." I laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. She told me to ruin someone else's holiday, remember? Silence again. I could practically hear her scrambling for an answer. A way to spin it. You're being dramatic, she snapped finally. You don't throw away your entire family over one bad moment. One bad moment. It was a lifetime of bad moments, of digs and jabs, of being the family scapegoat, the one who was never quite enough until they needed something. No, I told her flatly. I'm done. Her breath hitched. Hannah, they'll lose everything. I closed my eyes, breathing in the cold air that slipped through a cracked window. Then they'll lose everything, I said. But they already lost me. I hung up before she could say another word. My hands were shaking, but this time it wasn't fear. It was power. A strange, beautiful power that tasted so foreign I almost didn't recognize it. For the first time, I was protecting myself. No one was going to take that away. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the motel, a quiet resolve carrying me forward. If they wanted to see what life looked like without me holding up their foundation, then let them see it. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I drove back toward the city, the familiar skyline rising through the haze like a promise of something better. It was strange how the same highway that used to lead me home now felt like a road to freedom. A notification pinged on my phone, cutting through the soft hum of the heater. An email from the bank. Final confirmation. Guarantor removal complete. I pulled over for a moment, letting that single line sink in. No more ties. No more bargaining chips. No more signatures to keep them afloat. It was really done. I leaned my head against the steering wheel and felt the tears come again. But this time, they weren't from pain. They were relief, shaking me to my bones. For so many years, I'd been afraid to step away. Afraid they'd call me cruel, ungrateful, a monster for letting them fall. But what kind of monster leaves their child out on Christmas, shuts the door on their face, and then comes running only when the money threatens to dry up? My family had rewritten that word family into something transactional, something sharp. But I was rewriting it now for me. And it no longer meant survival through self-sacrifice. It meant peace. It meant boundaries. I started driving again, headed toward the tiny apartment I'd worked so hard for, a place that was mine, where nobody else could stake a claim. By the time I parked, the sun had dropped below the rooftops, leaving the sky streaked in bruised purple and gold. Inside, my small living room smelled of pine from the cheap fake tree'd set up alone. One string of lights flickered, blinking a little uneven, but beautiful in its own imperfect way. Home. I set the pie down on my kitchen counter, unwrapped it, and cut another slice. The first bite tasted like a goodbye I'd needed to say for years. I scrolled through more messages on my phone, each one a variation of the same script. Hannah, you're destroying us. How could you abandon your parents? Don't come back. I almost laughed. They didn't want me to come back unless I was willing to fix everything again. And I wasn't. They could keep the broken promises. I would keep my peace. I curled up on the couch, pipe balanced on my lap, and let the lights on my tree wash over me. No one to perform for, no one to apologize to, no one to shame me for wanting to just breathe. I whispered to myself, voice steady and sure, I am enough. And this time, there was no one around to argue. I woke the next morning in my own bed, sunlight creeping across the wall, warm and golden, like a quiet benediction. No shrill voices, no slammed doors, no list of chores or demands, just me. For a moment, I lay still, breathing in the soft hush of my apartment. I thought about them, what they must have been doing, panicking, probably calling more relatives, trying to guilt someone else into saving them. I felt a flicker of pity. Then I let it pass because I had pitied them for years, and all it bought me was pain. My phone buzzed again. A single text from Mom. The foreclosure letter came today. I hope you're satisfied. I read it twice. Satisfied? No, not satisfied. Free. Because if they lost the house, maybe they would finally understand what I'd carried for them year after year without thanks. Maybe for once they'd realize I wasn't a tool to be sharpened and put away. Maybe they'd finally see me, but I wouldn't wait around to find out. I set the phone down, refusing to reply, and poured myself a cup of coffee. The pie sat on the counter, a single slice left. I ate it slowly, the crust crumbly and sweet, each bite tasting like a promise I had made to myself. No more sacrificing yourself for people who would never bleed for you. They had called me ungrateful, dramatic, heartless. They could call me whatever they liked. I would call myself free, free from the guilt, free from the manipulation, free from the lie that blood alone was enough to justify endless harm. My tiny Christmas tree still glowed, one strand of lights blinking off for them. I smiled at it, a real, honest smile. This was mine, all of it. And next Christmas, I would not show up on that porch with hope in my hands, only to have it crushed. I would celebrate here in my small apartment, maybe with a friend, maybe alone, but never again with people who made me feel worthless. I raised my coffee mug like a toast, voice steady barely above a whisper to peace. Because if peace cost me my family, then that was a price I would pay 1,000 times over. And as the morning sunlight washed over me, I knew deep in my bones that I would never ever let them tear me down,